Why was getting a video studio the best possible move that I could have made at the time? I got it in November of 2020 in the middle of a global pandemic. Now, can you imagine just taking that leap of faith and hoping that it all turned out? I know that looking back now, it's really easy to see it, but at that time, I had no idea what I was getting into. Now, first, before I jump into the backstory of how I got into a studio, I want to share that this video is sponsored by Riverside. Riverside is one of my favorite applications to use when I'm trying to record people remotely. It's great for those online interviews where you've got a friend who's remote, whether they're on the other side of the country or maybe they're in a different country on a different continent. Riverside allows me to record ISOs, yes, ISOs, just like the ATEM switchers that we love to use, of each individual person. So if person 1 coughs or sneezes, I can mute their audio while person 2 is talking. And the best part, it's not susceptible to internet issues, unlike Zoom. So I'm gonna share with you a little bit more about what that looks like in just a little bit. But first, let's dive into the studio. So where did this idea come from? Well, when I got my start about a decade ago, one of the first things that I did was I went and rented out a co-working space. It was in what's called the Emerging Technology Center. It was a great spot in downtown Baltimore, and it put me at the forefront of all of these tech companies and startups. And at the time, it was great. I had a dedicated desk. There were conference rooms you could rent out. I could hang out and just chat with people. They put on different events, and it was one of the best ways for me to network with new potential clients. So that was kind of how I got my start. I didn't have a studio just yet, but I had a dedicated space. After I had my co-working space, I ultimately ran into a fellow videographer, and he had mentioned that he was looking to change up his space a little bit, move into a new studio, and he had some extra room for me. So I kind of thought about it for a little bit. I was a little bit nervous because it was a bigger financial burden to me, but at the time I realized, you know what? Having a video space meant being able to bring clients in and say, come to my studio, let's have a meeting at the studio, let's shoot it at the studio. You're worried about your office being messy? No problem. Come to the studio. We have a place for you. And I worked along with that colleague for quite a few years, and we split the space, and it was fantastic. We had 1,500 square feet of space. I had someone to bounce ideas off of. I had someone to go to lunch with. If I got sick, I had someone I could reach out and say, hey, is there any way you can cover for me? We had a team without having to have all of the financial burden of having a team, and we still were able to keep our two companies separate under one roof. It was great for a very long time until it wasn't so great. And the reason was because we started growing. Both of our companies grew. And we worked for each other and we helped each other out. But as our companies grew, we both needed the studio more and more. And what happened was he would have the studio booked on Wednesday, but I needed it on Wednesday, or I would have it booked on Thursday, but he needed it Thursday. And we were just kind of stepping all over each other's feet. So when the time came, I decided that it would be worth it to start looking around and seeing what it would take to get my own space. Now, I was really afraid because at the time I was basically doing work for him as a trade to access his studio or to pay him in rent. And I didn't know how much it was going to cost me until I stumbled upon a lucky find, and I found an office that was opening up. It was just under 1,000 square feet, and the price was just under $1,000 a month. That seemed like something that was doable for me at the time because my business was growing, and I knew that that expense would be a write-off for me when I talked to my accountant later in the year. So I took the leap, and I didn't just take the leap, I took the leap in the middle of a global pandemic. Now, before I dive into today's content, I want to introduce you to a tool that has completely transformed the way that I record videos online, Riverside.fm. It's like having a professional online video studio at your fingertips. This is Riverside, and when you first log into Riverside, you get to a dashboard where you can see all of your studios. You can create new studios anytime that you wish, and you can label them as you'd like. This was an interview with David. Now, when I've recorded this, I have a side-by-side video, but the beauty of this is I can go further down here and I can see that I have individual video files for each person that was in the recording. Now, the cool part about these recorded files is you can download the high-quality version where you get the option for the raw video or the raw audio. Of course, the video comes with the audio, but then you can also download a backup. Now, the really, really cool part about this is I can go into the Magic Editor and I can edit this video myself right here, and I can even see it
using that transcript off to the side here. So now let me show you how I would go about making a new studio. All I have to do is click on the new studio button and I'll name it My Studio. And then lastly, we will either enter the studio or continue with just the setup and you can enter it later. I'm just going to type in, this is my teleprompter. This is a fun tool they just added. And then I'm going to hit the teleprompter button here and boom, we now have a teleprompter right on the spot. So if I had a script I needed to read, or if I wanted to share it with that person later down the road, they can go ahead and actually see that teleprompter on their side as well. So if I go back to the Riverside dashboard and I go to this one right here. Now Magic Clips actually transcribes your video, and so I can go in right here and I can tweak it. So if I need to adjust where it was edited, I can always go back in and get that clip again. I can make a new clip and you can see our recorded files from right here. So all in all, a very, very cool platform. I love using it. I've done a few recordings with some clients for this. This allows me to record people remotely, and I highly recommend, if you're interested in checking this out, go ahead and click that link down in the description below because we have a special offer for you to get access to Riverside today. Now, back to the video.
So in the middle of a global pandemic, I decided, you know what? We're gonna go ahead and take on rent. And we're going to take on rent on top of rent because I was already renting a house. And then I also had to pay rent here. So it was a huge leap for me and I was super scared at first, but what I found was that I got an amazing space that I could make my own. I could go ahead and move all of my gear in. I'd have a place to store it safely. It was protected with an alarm. I could have my computer set up here, all my backup files and my RAID storage, everything that I needed I could have right here. So that is how I got to today in having the studio space. The three best reasons or biggest reasons why making this was the best decision at the time was because one, I now had a place to call my own, meaning if I wanted clients to come in, they saw just my name on the door. Branding is everything. And I had a space that they could come in anytime they wanted so long as I was available, and I didn't have to worry about someone else's schedule or stepping over their feet. So just overall availability, having somewhere that my clients could come into was a huge benefit. The second benefit was the fact that I had all of this equipment and I needed to store it somewhere, and storing it at the house that I had at the time was not really ideal. Why? Because all the gear in and out day after day, marking up the floor, getting messy, it was not good. And especially those days when I had to get out of the house at 5 a.m. for the early call times, it was just not gonna work for the long haul. So to have a dedicated storage space where I've got a closet and I've got shelves and I've got places to charge up batteries and store everything away, that was huge. Being able to take that out of my home, declutter my home, and have work at work and home at home was a huge benefit. Now, the third and final benefit that I really could not have predicted was being able to grow my income. How did I do that? Well, I created a space in the middle of a global pandemic where clients could potentially come in and live stream directly from my space. I had business class internet. I had a safe lockdown space where there's not tons of people moving through it, so they don't have to worry for health reasons whether or not it was safe to come here. It was literally just me and the clients. So it allowed me to create this income for myself of bringing clients into live stream at my studio space in a time where they couldn't show up at a hotel, at a time where they couldn't speak from the stage in front of thousands of followers and fans. And so this for me was a way that I pivoted at the right time, at the right place, and I really took my business to the next level. It therefore grew my live streaming services, and then once we started to go back to in-person events, well, we had a bunch of clients that said, hey, you live stream for us in the studio, guess what? We're doing live events and conferences now. We would love to bring you on to do our conferences. So it created and introduced a new income stream for my business. So those are the three key reasons why getting a studio at the time was probably one of the best moves in the middle of a global pandemic, despite all of the expenses. And I invite you, if you're thinking about getting a studio, if you have any questions about getting a studio, just post it down below in that comment section. I would love to hear from you. I'll get back to you. I do see all of them. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you very soon.